Today, we're tackling a really big topic, cannabis. There's just so much noise, so much information swirling around. Our goal here is to, well, cut through that
Yeah, exactly.
and get to the essential stuff, maybe some surprising facts you didn't know.
That's right. We really want to unravel not just, what it is, but how it actually works inside your body.
Right.
Looking at the effects, which are pretty diverse, and crucially, the safety side of things, all based on the info we've dug into.
Okay, so let's dive in. Here's something fascinating right off the bat. Cannabis is kind of unique. It mixes relaxing, mind-altering, and sometimes energizing effects. But unlike typical depressants, it doesn't slam the brakes on your whole central nervous system.
It's a real balancing act, chemically speaking, yeah. And, while it's ancient, used for thousands of years,
Right.
its legal status, well, that took a sharp turn in the 20th century. Though now, like in Australia and other places, medicinal access is opening up again.
So how does it actually do that? What's going on chemically?
Okay, so the main chemicals everyone talks about are cannabinoids. You've got THC, that's mostly for the psychoactive effects, the high.
Gotcha.
And CBD, which is more linked to therapeutic benefits, often without the high. But here's something less known, terpenes.
Terpenes, like the smell, pine, citrus.
Exactly. Those fragrant oils, they also bind to receptors in our brain. They don't drive the main effects like THC, but they kind of steer the experience.
Like background music influencing the mood.
Sort of, yeah. Like an orchestra, THC and CBD are maybe the lead violin and cello, but the terpenes, they're the rest of the strings, the woodwinds, adding nuance.
Okay, interesting. So with this whole orchestra playing, how do people typically use it? And maybe more importantly for safety, how long does it actually last?
Well, common ways are smoking, vaping, or eating it in edibles. How long it lasts, that really varies.
Right.
If you smoke or vape, you'll likely feel it within minutes. It peaks maybe within an hour, and the main effects last, say, 1 to 4 hours.
Pretty quick then.
Yeah, but edibles, totally different story. It can take up to 2 hours just to feel anything. The peak hits much later, and the effects, they can go on for 5 hours, maybe even more.
Wow, okay. Big difference.
Huge. And here's a critical point. Even when you feel like it's worn off, THC can actually stay in your system. Days, sometimes weeks, especially if you use it regularly.
Weeks? Why so long?
Because it's fat soluble. It builds up in your body's fat cells over time and gets released slowly.
Right, okay. That's definitely something to keep in mind. So beyond duration, what kind of effects are we talking about? I've heard it's a real mixed bag.
It absolutely is. Physically, the classic dry mouth, maybe increased appetite, the munchies.
Yeah.
Emotionally, it could be euphoria, deep relaxation, maybe feeling more connected to music, but sometimes also feeling kind of numb, emotionally disconnected. And psychologically, people report sharper senses, time feeling weirdly slow or fast, sometimes racing thoughts, maybe bursts of creativity. But, and this is important, higher doses. That's where you risk things like anxiety, panic attacks, or paranoia creeping in.
So it's very dose dependent.
Very. And also dependent on the person, their mood, where they are.
Right. The set and setting idea. What about long-term use? Are there significant risks beyond just a bad experience?
Yes, there definitely are potential risks with long-term heavy use. Psychological dependence is one. If you're regularly smoking it, especially mixed with tobacco, think respiratory issues, chest infections.
Makes sense.
For younger people, adolescents, regular use can potentially interfere with emotional development, maybe lead to issues with memory or concentration later on. And critically, for individuals who might already have a vulnerability, cannabis use can sometimes worsen or, in some cases, potentially trigger serious mental health conditions like psychosis, where someone loses touch with reality.
Okay, that's serious. So pulling this all together, what are the key things for people to know if they're thinking about safer use?
Well, first is understanding that set and setting we mentioned. Your mindset, your physical state, and your environment, who you're with. Setting, they massively shape the experience.
Right. Be mindful of where your head's at and where you are.
Exactly. And dosage is key. Always start with a very small amount. Cannabis strength varies wildly. You need to gauge your own tolerance.
Especially with edibles, I guess, given that delay.
Absolutely vital with edibles. Wait, really wait that full 2 hours before even thinking about having more. Patience is crucial there. And, for lung health, vaping is generally seen as a less harmful alternative to actually smoking it.
Okay. What about other risks, like just carrying it or mixing it with alcohol or other drugs?
Good points. Legally, just carrying it can have significant consequences depending on where you are. Know your local laws. That's basic safety.
Right.
Mixing substances, polydrug use is generally a bad idea because the outcomes are just so unpredictable.
How so?
Well, mix cannabis with alcohol, for example. You might get way more nauseous, feel dizzy. Effects can be amplified unexpectedly. Mix it with stimulants. That could really crank up anxiety, confusion, maybe paranoia.
Yikes.
And another big one, prescription meds. Cannabis can interact, sometimes dangerously. It might increase side effects of antidepressants or mess with blood pressure medications. And because THC lingers.
Ah, right, the fat storage thing again.
Exactly. It means you could fail a drug test roadside, work-related, potentially weeks after you last used it. That has real-world consequences.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really, it's highlighted so much nuance. It's way more complex than just, the simple narratives you often hear.
It really is. It's about the plant, sure, but also how it interacts with our biology, our minds, our environment, even the legal system around it.
So understanding all that seems pretty crucial.
Absolutely. I think, the final thought really is that understanding the science, understanding the actual effects, the risks, the legal stuff, that's what empowers you. It lets you make informed decisions, practice safer habits, especially when you're navigating a world where things aren't always clearly regulated or labeled.
Knowledge is power, essentially.
It really is,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to your own health and well-being. Understanding the reality of these substances and the context they exist in puts you in the driver's seat.